The Porsche 718 GTS 4-liter Boxster. Now that is one hell of a name, but the GTS 4-liter, along with its bigger brothers, the Spider and GT4, mark a return to form for the 718 lineup, reintroducing the much-missed Flat 6. So in this video, we're going to talk about what this thing's like to drive, some of the engineering that it's gone into the 4-liter variants of the 718, as well as whether you should or should not buy this, quite frankly, very expensive Porsche product. Inside the 718 GTS 4-liter, now the first thing to talk about before we get into price is that most of this cabin is a carryover from the prior generation Cayman or Boxster. So if you want to learn everything there is to learn about this cabin, watch our prior generation video on the GT4. I'm really going to focus on the highlights of what's changed and give you a quick overview. So let's get into price. And it's a big one because this car, as tested, is $116,000, which is unfair because this is a press car, which means it has every option conceivable. But note, the Boxster variants of the 718 start at about $88,000. I think it's $88,800, where the Cayman or the coupe variants start at $86,000. And according to Porsche, the average car out the door has about $18,000 worth of options added to it, which makes these cars a six-figure proposition, and in the changing sports car landscape, that's something to note. It's quiet, even as a convertible with a top up. You can expect interior noise volume, say, below the C7 Corvette, closer to the C8, and a little bit louder than the Supra. So it's very, very livable despite being a soft top. The interior space, the ergonomics of this cabin are also great. Your inputs are exactly where you want them to be. The steering wheel feels good, the pedal box is great, and this cabin fits all sizes as far as body types go. You can be smaller, you can be taller, you can be heavier, and because they have different seat options, your girth or your width of your body can also be accommodated. This car has the Sports Plus seats, which have slightly more adjustments than the base seats. I find them very, very comfortable. Next, infotainment, and that's what's been changed on this generation GTS. Really, this cabin is not the most practical. However, the trunk and the frunk do make this car a very usable daily driver because compared to most sports cars, there is far more storage in this car. I actually think it has more usable storage than the 911. The next thing is the interior layout. Many will argue that this system is cluttered and not intuitive. I like the physical controls. I think they're easier to use once you know where everything is, but a lot of people that have gotten into this car find it overwhelming when they're trying to find where things are. This cabin otherwise is superb. So with that, let's head to the shop. So Mark, this is the 718 GTS 4-liter, and yet again, this is another Porsche video, I know.
Yeah, and we did a GT4 video before this, the previous generation, so check that out. But a lot of that, surprisingly, from that car is a carryover here. And why is that, Jack?
Because the 981 was such a large leap forward from the prior generation Cayman and Boxster that this 982 Porsche didn't feel they had to change too much.
And they really didn't. Now, this is now on one of their new global architectures.
Yes, this is the MMB architecture, which is a modular platform that the 911 and the Cayman and Boxster are now on.
Which is smart. And a lot of this, what we're talking about here, modularity is the name of the game, even for Porsche. Gone are some of the more extreme bespoke cars, so they can get things through the plant flow. They can consolidate manufacturing from engine design to body structure. The ability to just send this down the line and just swap out some subframes for whatever they're doing. And it's smart because this is how you stay in business. And sports cars, don't sell. This would not keep the lights on, as you mentioned with, what was it, the Taycan?
Yeah, both. It doesn't matter what other model other than the Panamera you list. The Macan, the Cayenne, and I believe the Taycan all outsell their dedicated sports cars.
It's crazy. So let's talk about some of the trim levels here, Jack.
So the Boxster and Cayman, the 718s, are basically mechanically identical. Just one is a coupe and one is a convertible. Okay. And the models are largely a carryover between all of them. You have the base Cayman, the Cayman S, the Cayman T.
And all of those are four poppers, mind
Yes.
you.
The GTS, which is now a 4-liter flat six. They replaced the prior GTS, which was still a 4-popper.
Okay.
And then you have the GT4 and the Spider.
Okay, so all of those from GTS up all get the 4-liter.
Yes.
And there's subtle differences in tuning from the GTS to the GT4 and the Spider. But
In the engine. The
In the
suspension
engine.
is all different. The
Okay.
GTS has largely the same suspension found on the S and the regular variants, where the GT4 and Spider get the more
GT-oriented suspension, which changes a lot in the front and the rear.
Yes.
This, however, gets PASM and the sports suspension, which lowers this car
by
approximately.
about 20 millimeters, and then the GTS also gets larger front brakes
Okay,
as
the
standard
steel.
with the steels. However, the carbon ceramics, I believe, are largely unchanged.
Okay, so with this car, the big thing to say, this is a German spec car. This is a Euro pre-production model. It's not the same as what we get in the US. So things like the particulate filter are here for emissions, and the exhaust is more muted. And there might be some engine tuning differences for the Euro market and the US market, but again, pre-production car, so this may not look exactly final.
Yep. So what you get here in the front is all aluminum suspension, and PASM is an adaptive damper, and the front suspension are struts.
Correct, and this is on an aluminum subframe. All the suspension components are aluminum, and Porsche strut's a little bit different. It almost looks like a hybrid multi-link and a double wishbone, but you can tell they're struts because the shock absorber is integrated into the knuckle. The shock absorbers are load-bearing, which makes them a strut design, and it's the same front and rear. So the only other thing to say is, like most Porsches, this is completely flat underneath. Every nook and cranny has been covered up, either by body sealer, composite panels, and this is one of the reasons why these cars are so aero-stable at speed. The front does not have any active aero. The grills are just wide open. There's no fishing nets or any like fake grills. It's just wide open for cooling. And you have kick-ups here to feed air into the radiator, and most of the air blows out into the wheel wells. There are air directors here for the back of the brakes, and it has a hybrid dust shield. Some of it's open, some of it's not, so this is going to have a high overhead for thermal capacity. But let's get in the back, Jack, and take a look at the back half.
All right. So we made it to the rear of the 718 GTS. The first thing to talk about before we talk about the engine is the suspension. It's largely the same as the front. It's all aluminum and it's still strut-based. Next thing to talk about, transmission. In the 718 GTS, you get two options, a PDK, which comes with an e-diff, or a 6-speed manual, which has a mechanical limited slip. And it has a dual mass flywheel that was shared with the prior generation GT3. Next thing to talk about is the engine. So when this car first came out, the 718 was introduced with a 4-cylinder, which caused a lot of controversy. It objectively was better than the flat 6 in the 981 generation in every way. Faster, better fuel economy, yada, yada, yada. But according to most people, including me, is it lost a lot of the character that made these cars fun. It was no longer, you no longer had that flat 6 wail, which...
And part of this is the engineering side of development is in contradiction of what's here and here for consumers. And it's hard to explain sometimes to engineers, while something might be on paper, physically, objectively better, it doesn't have that same connection. And that's not something you can spell out. And that's why the new 6-cylinder or the 6-cylinder options have started to come back.
Yeah, and it makes total sense in a car like this. So this is the 4-liter, and in fact, actually all Porsche motors, except for the GT cars, like the upcoming GT3, are all in the same architecture for their sports cars. It's called the 982 platform, which is entirely modular. So the 4-cylinder, which is either the 2-liter or the 2.5, the 3-liter, which is a twin turbo, found in the Carrera and the Carrera S, the video we just did, and the turbo are all on the same platform, including this 4-liter.
And there's a commonality in parts, because again, you could have warehousing of all these common parts, send it down the same line, and then have the same block or foundation or different versions of those pieces.
Yep, so this 4-liter, when compared to the 3-liter found in the Carrera S, is naturally aspirated. It revs to 7,800 RPM in the GTS and to 8,000 RPM in the GT4 and Spider.
The last thing to talk about before the drive, we're on tires that have been absolutely annihilated by the previous press outlets or whatever tour of duty this car's on. So this car, the GTS and lower, gets a standard set of like high performance summer tires. When you go to the GT4 and the Spider, you get a stickier compound like a Cup 2. So let's get this out on the road and see how it drives.
All right.
Oh, Jack, we're in the 718.
GTS 4-liter, Mark.
Oh boy, let's just start this off right in the turn because you know what, we're not going fast. Whoa, mid-engine design over the 911. First time I got in this, you told me, oh Mark, you're gonna hate this car.
Because I know you don't like Porsches, and this engine is more muted because it's one of the, as we talked about, it's a Euro spec car. Once you get past that, and the fact that it's a little more refined and kind of numb feeling a little bit because it's trying to be an everything car, you know, be a good daily, be a good sports car, it's a little compromised. It's superb, but you know, I know how you feel about the Germans.
This car is amazing.
I'm so surprised to hear you say that.
This is like we talked about in the 911. The Carrera, was it the S?
The Carrera S, yes.
Carrera S. I was so floored by how good that car is, and this is just another version of that. This is the mid-engine version. Yes, it may not have some of the prestige and all the things that go along with it, but the new styling, manual gearbox, the way that you feel instantly connected to this car without feeling like you're getting beat up, and it is so comfortable. I love it. Carbon ceramics. It's cold out, but you know what? You would never be able to tell. I think everything about this car is so neutral and so natural that if you have any type of driving aptitude, you feel that there's rare that I feel disconnected to a car. All the inputs are so balanced, and this is something that we talked about on the 911. From steering, gearbox, the pedals, it's not just pedal layout, which is a little bit skewed in this car, but I don't particularly notice it like you do. But clutch take up, it's so natural to be smooth when you drive this. I have zero issues heel towing, and obviously this has rev matching and a whole bunch of other things going on for it, but oh yeah, baby.
It's funny to me that you
love driving this car, bro.
It's funny to me that you like this so much because you didn't like the GT4.
No, I didn't. The last gen. Well, there's a huge pro to this compared to the other GT4. Just listen. The engine.
Yeah, this 4-liter is incredible.
Oh,
it is far superior to the drivetrain that was in the GT4 in the prior gen car. And this is even a muted variant of it. I don't think it sounds as sweet as, say, the Evora GT we just had. It doesn't have the character,
but it revs.
Yeah.
It's naturally aspirated. It's like a microcosm. Well, not a microcosm. It's like 75% of what the GT3 engine is.
For 50 grand less.
Yes. It shaved off some RPM. It shaved off some of the veracity of getting up there. And part of that is because the damn gearing on these cars. And I know why Porsche did it. They kind of explained that to rework the gearbox to make it fit was not possible. They said it was a mechanical reason they couldn't, but also a cost reason. They don't sell enough of these to make a bespoke gearbox to make shorter gearing. And I think that's, again, like most of these cars, that's what holds it back in the fun factor.
Yeah, the problem with these gears is by the time you want to rev this thing out to redline in second gear, you're like 80 miles an hour, which I don't know where most people live, but by us, it does limit some of the fun-having factor without going to jail.
And when you have one of the most beautiful sounding naturally aspirated engines like this in the GT3, it really, really hampers the fun factor. So you have to then lean on doing stupid shit. And the fact that this car feels so friggin' neutral I don't like putting cars sideways, you know
you're
me.
not me.
But it just wants to rotate so effortlessly and so neutral that you never feel like this thing's getting out of control, even with bald-ass tires in the back. It's remarkable.
Now, this is a very, very balanced car, and it does exactly what you want it to do when you tell it to do it. You're not fighting the car almost ever. All of its reactions are from you doing it, not something wrong with the suspension. I will say though, after driving the Evora GT, which to me is probably the closest competitor to, say, the GT4 Spider and this GTS, it lacks some of the character that comes from that car's flaws.
Yeah, and here's the thing with the Evora, right? The Evora has one of the best front ends of any car you can get in, but it's right on that cusp of being a track day only car. They tried to make it more like a 911 by design, but you never get in that car and think, oh, I'm gonna drive this every day. And that's where the Porsches, with all their money, all the technology, their ability to have an interior space that doesn't feel like a coffin, this could be a second car that you want to drive all the time, and maybe if you're crazy, a first car in a good climate, where the Evora always gets bumped down to that third car. You're always thinking about, is the weather good? What's the traffic like? Do I want to haul stuff? Do I want to put people in it? And the Evora becomes more of a toy compared to this, where this gives you about 75% of what that car is, and it's definitely faster. There's no doubt it's faster than the Evora, but the Evora has a better connected feel all the way around.
Here's the next question I have for you, because I know it's going to come up. What about the C8? I don't like the C8, and you don't like the C8, and watch our video to figure out why. But that car, really, the prices are like 80 to 90 grand in today's climate.
This is a C8 to me, where it stands as of 2020, 2021, is not a driver's car.
No, it's not.
It's a GT car that is extremely fast in a straight line. That car has a lot more development to be done to make that a complete connected experience. As it stands, you do not feel like you're connected to that car. It may put down all the numbers, but this is a far more special driving experience emotionally, and the Evora just kind of amps that up even more. If you love to drive a car, these are the ones that
This is like the middle ground driver's car. You don't sacrifice a lot, that thing where it has to be all things to all people. You could drive this every single day. It rides well, it's comfortable, the drivetrain's good, the suspension doesn't beat you up, and it's very connected without being so hyper-focused like the Evora, where it is very compromised.
And I think we're going to be doing a GT4 and the other variants of this, so we're not going to beat this to death in this drive, but let's get into the final thoughts, Jack.
All right.
Final thoughts on the 718 with a 4-liter and manual transmission. Now, cars like this are essentially non-existent anymore. And even knowing that coming into driving this, I was not excited for it. I drove the previous generation 718, and while there was nothing wrong with it, the 4-popper, as quick as it was just kind of a numb experience. So what I thought was going to happen, I'm going to get into this and like, why bother? It's expensive. So when I drove it for the first time, I already had a negative kind of connotation in my head. The first time I turned that wheel and I accelerated, I instantly felt like this was one of those rare experiences where, one, if you bought it right and you could afford this car, not be in total debt, this is one of the best driving experiences I've had in a long time. It reminds me a lot of kind of what the Miata is trying to do, the S2000s, more of those affordable sports cars, combining some of the elements of like the modern Supra. But because it's mid-engine, it doesn't have that pushiness of the 911s. Like, you can do more stupid stuff. You can brake harder without having to kind of constantly manage weight. This thing wants to rotate under throttle. And when I say rotate, it's not like Hellcat. It's not like Mustangs where you're like, mash the gas and just like you're flipping the wheel around. I mean, it's subtle inputs, subtle corrections. It is such a balanced, wonderful car to drive that this would be, because of the manual transmission, because of the engine, the naturally aspirated engine, this is one of those few cars that you don't just think, well, I'm going to cycle through this. If you could afford it, or you could afford a GT4, you buy this, you keep it in the garage, and you know it's going to keep its value if you don't destroy the thing. That's how special it is. It's one of the best driving experiences I've had, and I can't wait to kind of do the videos on the GT3s and the GT4s to kind of explain how they take that to the next level. But the only negative part here is I wish that they would have updated the interior to what they did to the 992, 911, kind of combining the modernness, getting rid of some of all the like cluttered physical controls. And of course, the manual trans, I'm glad it's there. I just wish the gearing was better. And I know this has been a complaint on these cars for a long time. But even with that said, you're going to love this car if you love driving. There's just no other way about it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.